Let the lights fade and rewind time by just a few seconds. You're standing in front of the fridge, orange juice on one side, milk on the other. You think you're about to decide, but the decision, it's already done. Somewhere deep in your skull, a flicker of electricity sparked, a tiny signal fired before you even felt thirsty, before orange juice or milk even formed as a thought. Your brain had already cast its vote, and it didn't ask for your opinion. This isn't poetry, it's biology. Scientists have hooked people up to machines that watch the brain in real time, and what they found is wild. Your neurons light up seconds before you make a choice. Not after, not during, before. That moment of choice, it might just be your brain sending you the memo, long after the decision's already on its way. So next time you feel in control, remember, you're not the one driving. You're just the first to hear the news. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're aware. You can hear these words. You can sense your own thoughts passing through like soft shadows. And yet, nobody, not a single scientist, not the smartest philosopher, can explain why. Neurons firing are just electrical signals, like tiny lightning storms in a wet sponge. That shouldn't feel like anything. It should be like watching sparks on a wire, cold and indifferent. But it isn't. Somehow, your experience is drenched in feeling. Seeing the color red isn't just data, it's redness, vivid and impossible to explain. Here's the unsettling part. You can map a brain. You can see which region lights up when you taste chocolate or hear a song you love. But no scan reveals the inner glow of what it's like to be you. This gap, the one between raw biology and lived experience, is called the explanatory gap. It's like the universe is hiding the answer behind a two-way mirror, letting you watch yourself exist without telling you why. A mainstream fact? Easy. The human brain has about 86 billion neurons. That's roughly the same number of stars in the Milky Way. Each one connects to thousands of others, forming trillions of pathways. But you could replace a neuron with a silicon chip and, according to some experiments, it would still process information. So why does wet, biological matter produce the feeling of being, while circuits and wires, as far as we know, remain silent? And then there's the fringe idea. Some physicists whisper about something called quantum consciousness. The theory suggests that maybe awareness isn't just a byproduct of neurons. Maybe it's woven into the very fabric of reality. Tiny quantum events inside your brain, they say, collapse into patterns that generate awareness. But mainstream neuroscience rolls its eyes at that, calling it more sci-fi than science. Still, the debate won't die. Scientists still argue whether consciousness is emergent, like a strange side effect of complex systems, or fundamental, like space and time itself. If it's emergent, then somewhere between a brain with no thoughts and a brain like yours, there's a tipping point where matter suddenly starts experiencing itself. If it's fundamental, then maybe even the smallest particle has some faint whisper of feeling, like the faintest hum in the dark. Neither answer is satisfying. Both are unnerving. Meanwhile, here you are, just existing, floating in a body you didn't choose, in a moment you can't quite hold. If you think about it too hard, you realize how precarious it is. All it takes is one little brain injury, one tiny lesion, and your awareness can blur, vanish, or distort. A single stroke in the wrong spot can make you lose the concept of left and right. Or worse, you could stay alive but lose the you inside, a husk moving through the world without that secret inner spark. Here's a funny thought, though maybe it's more tragicomic. Your brain didn't need to produce consciousness to keep you alive. Reflexes, instincts, survival, those don't require the movie of you. A spider doesn't need to feel the spiderness of itself to catch a fly. Evolution didn't have to give you the ability to suffer over the meaning of existence at 2 a.m. And yet it did. It gave you this strange, heavy gift, awareness. Maybe it's an accident. Maybe it's a cosmic joke. And you wonder, is consciousness just an illusion of storytelling neurons? Or is it the only real thing there is, the ground zero of existence? It's wild, isn't it? That every other thing you only know because you are conscious of it. Consciousness is the lens you can't look beyond. You can study the brain all you want, but you'll always be peering from inside it, like trying to see your own eyeballs without a mirror. Remember this moment, because it's the first crack in the wall. Tonight, you're not just thinking about consciousness. You're noticing it, noticing itself. That little loop, that's where things get slippery. That's where you realize the question, where does it come from? Might never have an answer you can live with. But don't drift off just yet. Because this awareness of yours, it isn't even showing you the whole truth. It's editing things right now, this second, without your permission. You're still here, wrapped in your own awareness. But now let's peel back another layer. The quiet, invisible way your mind edits reality without ever telling you. You think you see the world in full color, sharp and complete, like a flawless photograph. You don't. You're looking at fragments, stitched together by your brain, like a lazy filmmaker using stock footage to fill in the blanks. Take your vision, for example. Right now, you believe you're seeing everything in front of you with equal clarity, but only the very center of your gaze, the fovea, is in high resolution. The rest is a blurry mess. Your brain just fills it in, guessing what should be there. Look at your own hand in your peripheral vision. It's a smudge until you turn your eyes toward it, and there's an actual blind spot on your retina, a place where no light registers at all. Do you see a dark hole in your vision? Nope. Your brain just pastes over it with a fake patch of more of the same. It's like Photoshop on autopilot. Here's a mainstream fact. Your brain processes only about 40 bits of conscious information per second, but your senses deliver about 11 million bits per second. That means over 99% of reality is filtered out before you even know it exists. You're basically living inside a highlight reel. It's like thinking you're watching a live concert when you're really just getting the best 5 seconds of each song. And it doesn't stop at vision. Your memory is edited too. Think about your last vacation or your last argument. You're sure you remember it accurately, but studies show every recall is a rewrite. Each time you pull up a memory, your brain tweaks it, smoothing the edges, adding details that never happened, erasing inconvenient truths. It's not malicious. It just wants a story that makes sense. You're walking around with a head full of edited fiction and calling it your life. Now for the fringe tidbit. There's something called change blindness. Psychologists ran experiments where a person asks for directions, and halfway through the conversation, a construction worker walks between them. Behind the distraction, a different person takes the place of the original questioner. And most people don't notice. They keep talking like nothing happened. Your mind doesn't care about raw reality. It cares about convenience. It'll happily skip the details if the overall scene feels good enough. Scientists still argue whether consciousness actually creates the illusion of a continuous detailed world, or whether it's just passively stitching together whatever scraps it gets from the senses. Some argue you're not seeing the world as it is at all. You're seeing a controlled hallucination your brain generates based on best guesses and past experience. Reality, in this view, is less like a window and more like a customized screensaver. And think about hearing. Even now, you're filtering sounds. You're hearing my voice in your mind, but you're ignoring the hum of your room, the faint buzz of electronics, maybe the soft whoosh of your breathing. Your brain treats those as background noise, but if I whispered your name, your actual name, suddenly the sound would cut through everything, sharp and immediate. You didn't consciously choose that. Your brain decided for you what mattered. Here's the really cheeky part. You believe you're in control of your focus. But are you? Try staring at a single point without thinking about anything else for even 30 seconds. Within seconds, your mind will wander. Oh, did you lock the door? What's that weird itch on your leg? Did you send that email? Your awareness is like a cat, darting after any movement. You're the one holding the leash, but it doesn't feel like you're really in charge. A joke for you. Your brain is like that friend who swears they're being honest, but secretly deletes your embarrassing photos before you ever see them. It keeps the world clean, digestible, less overwhelming. Sure, it's nice, but it's also lying to you. Constantly. And here's a quiet horror hidden in plain sight. Right now, you're not noticing most of your own body. Can you feel your socks without deliberately thinking about them? Probably not. But now that I've mentioned it, there they are, pressing into your skin. Your brain was ignoring the signal because it wasn't useful. Same with your tongue. It's been sitting in your mouth this whole time, heavy and wet, but you didn't notice until now. Sorry. Now you can't unnotice. The editing goes even deeper with time. You think the present moment is a seamless now, but it's not. Your brain actually averages events over tiny slices of time, about 1/10 of a second, creating what's called the specious present. So when you clap your hands, you're not hearing two discrete claps in real time. You're hearing them smoothed into one continuous flow. Your consciousness is buffering like a low-quality live stream. Remember that blind spot. Think of your whole reality as one giant blind spot. You trust your brain to fill in the gaps, and it does, convincingly. But that means you can never be sure you're seeing what's really there. You might be missing the most important details because they simply didn't fit the pattern your mind expected. And this brings you to a quiet, unsettling thought. If your mind edits what you see, hear, remember, and even feel, how much of you is actually real? Don't answer that yet, because the real kicker is coming next. Not only is your mind editing reality, it's built on a question that has no satisfying answer. The hard problem. Why anything feels like anything at all. Now you're sinking deeper, and the question sharpens like a slow blade. Why does anything feel like anything at all? This is what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. Not the easy problems. The easy ones are things like how neurons fire, how information moves through the brain, how senses integrate. Those are like fixing the plumbing. But the hard problem, that's the impossible one. Why do those electrical signals give rise to experience? Why is there a warm, velvety something instead of endless, silent nothing? Imagine a machine, a perfect copy of your brain, It processes the same inputs, sends the same outputs. It says ouch when you prick it. It laughs at a joke. It even claims it has dreams. But does it feel anything inside? Or is it a hollow shell parroting human behavior? That's the philosophical zombie, an entity indistinguishable from you, but with no inner light. And the uncomfortable part is, there's no way to prove you aren't surrounded by them right now. You only know you're conscious. Everyone else is a guess. Here's a mainstream fact. The brain is about 3 pounds of meat, mostly water, with a texture similar to tofu. That's it. It's made of ordinary atoms, carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, the same stuff in a loaf of bread. And yet, here you are, not just existing, but knowing you exist. Bread doesn't do that. Rocks don't do that. So why should this soggy, electrified lump care about itself? And here's a fringe tidbit. Some theorists, desperate for an explanation, propose pan-proto-psychism. Don't worry, you don't have to memorize that. It's the idea that maybe every bit of matter has some proto-conscious property, some tiny seed of awareness, and complex arrangements like brains just amplify it. In other words, you're not separate from the universe's awareness. You're just a dense knot of it. Sounds poetic, right? But critics say it's just philosophical hand-waving dressed in cosmic glitter. Scientists still argue whether consciousness is even something that needs an explanation, or if the question itself is wrong. Maybe asking, why does it feel like something, is like asking, why is water wet? Maybe experience is just the baseline state of the universe, and brains merely tune it, like radios catching a signal. But if that's true, then awareness didn't come from evolution or chemistry. It was always there, like an invisible ocean, waiting for something to notice it. And yet, here's the thing you can't escape. No matter how much you understand the brain's mechanics, the feeling remains unexplained. You could trace every neural pathway of seeing the color blue. You could say, it activates this cone cell which triggers this neuron, which sends this signal. But none of that explains the sheer, indescribable blueness of blue. The raw texture of experience, the qualia, is locked inside, beyond objective reach. It's like describing chocolate to someone who's never tasted sweetness. Words fail. Let's add a little joke, just to keep your head from exploding. Your brain is like a magician who pulls a rabbit out of a hat. But when you ask how it did the trick, it just shrugs and says, I don't know. I was surprised too. And you're not off the hook either. Think about your own thoughts. Where do they come from? You're listening to me now, but soon, some random thought will bubble up, like, I need to buy milk, or did I leave the oven on? Did you create that thought? Or did it just appear, like a whisper from nowhere? You don't know how you do it. You only notice after it's already there. Even more curious, you can't find the you who's supposed to be experiencing all this. Close your metaphorical eyes and look for yourself. Where is the experiencer? Is it behind your eyes? In your chest? Is it even anywhere? The more you search for a fixed center, the more it dissolves into thin air. It's like trying to grab a soap bubble. Consciousness feels solid until you examine it, and then it's nothing but transparency. Here's a fun but eerie fact. Anesthesiologists still don't know how anesthesia erases awareness. They can knock you out, shut down your sense of time, self, and world, and then bring you back. But they don't know why the chemicals stop experience. Your brain keeps humming, cells still fire, but the movie of you just goes dark. That means there's some delicate switch between being and not being. and nobody knows exactly where it is. Now, think about dreams. In a dream, you're fully convinced it's real. You're in a city that doesn't exist, talking to someone who might be alive or dead, and it all feels perfectly normal until you wake up. So what's to say this right now isn't another layer of the same? You'll insist it's different, but if you're wrong, you won't know until you wake up again. And maybe you never do. So the hard problem remains, a riddle staring at itself. Why is there something it's like to be you? Why is the universe aware of itself at this tiny point called your life? And even if you found the answer, would it change anything? You'd still be here, feeling what it's like to feel, trapped in the same strange miracle. But don't drift too far into the void of why just yet. Because if you think having one consciousness is weird, wait until you see what happens when you split it in two. You're gliding deeper, and now we're about to slice your consciousness in half. Don't worry, it won't hurt. At least, not physically. In the 20th century, neurosurgeons discovered something strange while treating epilepsy. They performed a procedure called a corpus callosotomy, severing the corpus callosum, the thick bundle of nerve fibers connecting the two hemispheres of the brain. The seizures calmed down, the patients recovered, and at first glance, they seemed normal. But then the weirdness began. When researchers tested these split-brain patients, they found something uncanny. If you flashed a word to the left visual field, processed by the right hemisphere, the patient couldn't say what they saw, but their left hand, controlled by the right hemisphere, could pick up the correct object. Meanwhile, the left hemisphere, which handles language, had no clue what was going on. It was like two separate minds were sharing one body, awkwardly coexisting like roommates who don't speak. Here's a mainstream fact. Your brain's hemispheres are specialized. The left tends to dominate language and analytical thinking, while the right handles spatial awareness, emotions, and holistic processing. Normally, they talk so smoothly through the corpus callosum that you feel like one unified you. But cut the cord, and the illusion cracks. Suddenly, it's as if two consciousnesses emerge, each with its own stream of awareness. Now for the fringe tidbit. In some experiments, the two hemispheres even seem to disagree. One famous case involved a split-brain patient choosing clothes. The right hand picked a conservative shirt, but the left hand, acting independently, grabbed a bright, flashy one. In another, one hemisphere wanted to stand up, while the other resisted, causing the body to literally struggle against itself. It's like watching a polite civil war inside a single person. Scientists still argue whether this means two separate selves truly exist after the split, or if it's just one consciousness temporarily unable to communicate with itself. But think about it. If you can create two semi-independent minds just by cutting a bundle of nerves, how solid is the one self you feel right now? Maybe it's always been a fragile truce between multiple voices inside. And here's where it gets even stranger. Sometimes, even in an intact brain, the hemispheres seem to have different priorities. Have you ever felt torn between logic and emotion, like two parts of you are arguing? That might not be a metaphor. It might literally be your left hemisphere, the rational storyteller, trying to make sense of the intuitive, silent impulses from the right. When you feel conflicted, it's not just poetic language, it's biology. Here's a little joke to soften the unease. Your brain is like a married couple forced to share a tiny apartment. They mostly get along, but sometimes one half wants to stay in and read, while the other half wants to go dancing. and you're just stuck in the middle, pretending it's fine. There's also this bizarre thing called the left hemisphere interpreter. When the two halves can't share information, the left hemisphere, the chatterbox, just makes up stories to explain the right hemisphere's mysterious behavior. For example, if the right hemisphere is shown a picture of a snow shovel and the left is shown a chicken, and then the patient picks a shovel with the left hand and a chicken with the right, the left hemisphere says, "Oh, the chicken goes with the coop, and you need a shovel to clean it." Total nonsense. But it feels like a reasonable explanation. Your brain would rather invent a lie than admit it doesn't know why it did something. Remember that blind spot from before, the one your brain quietly fills in. Now imagine that principle applied to yourself. Even when parts of you are hidden from you, your mind just paints over the gaps with a neat little story. You're constantly interpreting yourself, not actually knowing yourself. And here's an eerie thought. What if you already have multiple selves inside you, and the brain just coordinates them so seamlessly you never notice? Some psychologists argue we're all a bundle of semi-independent modules. One that handles hunger, one for social cues, one for survival instincts. And consciousness is just the committee meeting they all attend. Split brain patients just happen to show us what happens when the committee stops talking. Think about how fragile that unity is. A surgical cut, a traumatic injury, or even a powerful hallucination could scatter your sense of self into fragments. You'd still be alive, still breathing, but the you recognize might dissolve, replaced by voices that don't agree, memories that don't sync. It makes you wonder, how many selves can a single brain hold before it stops being one person? And then there's the question nobody likes to ask. If splitting the brain creates two streams of consciousness, which one is the real you? Or are they both equally valid? If someone cut your corpus callosum tomorrow, would you survive? Or would you become two different beings, each claiming to be the original? It's a puzzle with no satisfying answer. What's even more unsettling is that you already experience microsplits all the time. Ever driven home on autopilot and suddenly realized you don't remember the last 10 minutes? That's one part of your brain handling the task while another wandered off. You weren't fully unified, you were parallel processing. So maybe the self you cling to is just a temporary truce between competing processes. A performance. A dance held together by thin threads of communication. And when those threads snap, you see the truth. The one you was never as whole as it seemed. But before you get too comfortable with the idea of two selves, let's stretch the timeline. Because even your unified consciousness, when it's working perfectly, isn't actually living in the now. You're still listening, still following the flow of this awareness. But here's a secret your brain doesn't announce. You are always unavoidably living in the past. Not metaphorically, literally. Everything you experience, this word, this breath, the soundless echo of your own thoughts, is delayed by fractions of a second. Your consciousness is always catching up, never quite in sync with reality. Here's why. When you see something, a flash of light, a moving hand, it takes time for your retina to send signals to the brain, for the brain to process those signals, and for your awareness to assemble them into a cohesive moment. Visual information alone takes about 80 milliseconds to become conscious. Touch can take even longer. So what you think of as now is actually a slightly stale recording, an echo of events that already happened. A mainstream fact. Neuroscientists call this the perceptual moment, a tiny window of about 100 to 200 milliseconds, where the brain gathers data, stitches it together, and serves it to you as the present. You're not seeing reality frame by frame. You're seeing it in edited bursts, like a movie with a tiny delay. The present you think you're in, it's really the recent past. And here's the fringe tidbit. There's something called the flash lag illusion. If a moving object and a flash of light appear at the same spot at the same time, you perceive the moving object as ahead of the flash. Your brain predicts where the moving object should be and shows you the future. Just a little bit. It's cheating time to keep the world smooth. Your consciousness is not a live feed. It's a predictive rendering. Scientists still argue whether this delay means you never experience the true present. Some say the brain builds a rolling specious present, like a small buffer, so you're always living in a stitched-together version of reality. Others claim you're not even aware of the delay because your brain is constantly backdating events, creating the illusion that you saw or heard something exactly when it happened. Either way, the now you feel is a construction. Here's a simple test you can try. Clap your hands. Hear the sound. You think it was instant, but it wasn't. Sound waves had to travel through the air. Your ears had to convert them to signals, and your brain had to process those signals. By the time you hear your clap, it's already over. Your body is always a tiny time traveler, lagging behind the universe. And here's a little joke. You're basically watching the world on a slight delay, like a bad live stream. But don't worry, no one else notices either, because they're lagging too. It's the most universal glitch. Now here's something more unsettling. Experiments show that if your brain receives conflicting information about timing, it will just reorder reality. In the cutaneous rabbit illusion, researchers tap your arm in two places rapidly. Instead of feeling two separate taps, you feel a series of taps hopping along your arm, like a tiny rabbit. Your brain invents intermediate sensations that never happened, just to make the timing feel smooth. Reality gets rewritten for your comfort. Think about the implications. Your sense of time, the very thing that structures your life, isn't a neutral clock. It's an interpretation. You never directly feel now. You only feel what your brain decides is now. And it gets worse. There's evidence that your brain starts preparing actions before you're aware of deciding to act. In Libet's famous experiment, people were asked to flex their wrist whenever they felt like it, and note the exact moment they decided. Brain scans showed the readiness potential, the signal to move, fired almost half a second before the participants reported making the conscious decision. So your awareness isn't even the first to know what you're doing. It's as if you're the narrator of a movie that's already been filmed. You're adding commentary after the fact, telling yourself a story of, I chose this, when, in reality, the choice was already unfolding backstage. And here's a sensory callback. Remember when we talked about your brain filling in visual blind spots? It's doing the same with time. There are tiny gaps, micro blackouts where things haven't been processed yet. And instead of showing you the holes, your mind paints over them. You're living in a smoothed over timeline that never truly matches the raw data. So if you're always a fraction behind, what does that say about the present? Maybe there isn't one, not in the way you imagine. Maybe what you call now is just a rolling memory, a constantly updated log that feels immediate only because there's no delay detector inside you. Here's another quiet, haunting thought. If you could somehow stop the brain's predictive smoothing, you'd see the world as it truly is, fragmented, jittery, slightly late. You'd notice every micro delay in speech, every lag between a movement and its sound, every tiny void between cause and effect, it would drive you insane. So your brain hides it. And it's not just about the senses. Emotion lags too. You feel something, fear, joy, sadness, and only afterward do you explain it. That's why you can suddenly laugh or cry and have no idea why, until your conscious mind scrambles to catch up. So to recap, you're never truly here. You're always after. The present is a construction, a smoothed hallucination that hides the lag. And that means your consciousness isn't riding reality. It's trailing it, like a tiny paper boat on a delayed current. But don't panic. This lag, this buffer, is what allows you to function without drowning in chaos. You might not live in the true present, but you live in the only present you could survive. Still, there's a darker twist. If you're always behind, and your brain is making choices before you even arrive, who's actually in charge? That's what we have to face next. When you realize the you who thinks it's making decisions might just be a spectator. So here you are, still floating a heartbeat behind reality. But the next layer is more unsettling. You're not the one making choices. Not really. The brain decides first. You find out later. Let's start with a simple experiment. The famous Libet study I hinted at. People sat in a lab, watching a clock, and were told to flex their wrist whenever they felt like it. Pure free choice. Meanwhile, electrodes measured their brain activity. And here's what happened. The brain's readiness potential, the spark that signals a movement is coming, fired almost half a second before the person consciously decided to move. Think about that. The body was already committed before the you in your head got the memo. A mainstream fact. Newer studies with brain scanners have extended that gap even further. In some cases, scientists can predict which button you'll press up to 7 seconds before you're aware of choosing. 7 seconds. That's not free will. That's you narrating a decision that's already in progress. Here's a fringe tidbit to twist the knife. Some researchers say consciousness might just be a user interface, a neat dashboard your brain built so you feel like you're in control. It's like the graphic icons on your phone. They don't show you the raw, messy code. They show you a simple picture of a camera or a folder. Your sense of agency might be the same kind of illusion. It makes life more manageable, even if it's fake. Scientists still argue whether this means free will is truly dead. Some claim there's still room for conscious veto power. You might not start the process, but maybe you can stop it before it finishes. They call it free won't. But others argue even that last-minute stop sign is just another unconscious process dressed up in the illusion of choice. Think about your daily life. You decide to get coffee, but did you decide? Or did your body crave caffeine, nudging your brain with little biochemical whispers? Dopamine here, adenosine there, until the thought, I want coffee, appeared in your mind like a gift. Then you claim it as your decision, but really, you're just taking credit for something your cells wanted. Here's a little joke. Your conscious self is like a politician giving a press conference, proudly announcing decisions that were already made in secret meetings. And if you want a real-world example of this strange autopilot, think about how often your actions surprise you. Have you ever blurted out a word you didn't mean to say? Or found yourself reaching for your phone without realizing it? Or walked into a room and forgot why? The conscious you is late to the party. Again, remember the left hemisphere interpreter from the split brain patients. The same thing happens here. Your conscious mind explains why you did something, even when it has no clue. You reach for the cookie, and your brain says, I wanted a snack, when in reality, it was just a habit loop firing before you even noticed the urge. Here's an eerie fact. People with certain types of brain damage sometimes experience alien hand syndrome, where one hand moves on its own. Buttoning a shirt, the other hand just unbuttoned, or even trying to smack the person in the face. The conscious self watches in horror, completely unable to control it. That's just the extreme version of what's always happening, in softer, quieter ways. Now think of all the little micro decisions you make every day. Breathing deeper, shifting in your chair, blinking. Do you consciously decide each one? Number. Your brain handles 99% of it backstage, and you only get the highlight reel. And here's the callback. Remember the delay we talked about in the last section? Combine it with this. By the time you feel like you've made a decision, it's already too late. The brain has already started executing it. Your conscious moment is just the afterimage. So what are you then? Maybe you're not the driver. Maybe you're the passenger. Or worse, you're the commentator sitting in the back seat, narrating the trip as if you're in control. But really, you're just along for the ride. And yet, you feel like you're in charge. You have to. Imagine the chaos if you truly felt the truth, that you're a puppet of neurons and chemicals, your strings pulled by unseen impulses. So your brain hides it. It lets you feel the illusion of authorship because it keeps you calm. There's a fringe theory that consciousness evolved not to control but to communicate. Early humans needed to explain their behavior to others to say, I chose to share food, or I planned this hunt. So the brain built a storyteller to justify what the body was already doing. The storyteller is you, and this raises a wild thought. If the you who thinks it's choosing isn't really in charge, then where does responsibility live? Are you responsible for an action if you didn't consciously cause it? Or is responsibility just another useful story we tell each other to keep society from unraveling? Don't panic. You're not a helpless puppet, at least not completely. You feel agency because it works well enough for survival. And maybe that's the only kind of free will you need, a convincing mirage. But there's an even stranger frontier. If you're not choosing, and your awareness can vanish in sleep or under anesthesia, where does it go when it disappears? That's the next unsettling thing you need to face. When the self itself simply stops existing, and then comes back as if nothing happened. Now let's drift into the strangest blackout of all, the one you've experienced thousands of times without even questioning it. When you sink into deep sleep, where do you go? One moment you're lying in bed, feeling the weight of your body and the hum of your thoughts. Then nothing. Hours vanish. The next time awareness returns, it feels seamless. But in between, no you, no time, no memory. Just an empty gap. Deep sleep is unlike dreaming. In dreams, there's still a flickering movie, bizarre scenes, impossible physics, odd narratives. But in deep, dreamless sleep, there's truly nothing. Scientists call it slow wave sleep, a phase where your brain's activity slows to a synchronized rhythm. Neurons still fire, but the complex patterns that sustain consciousness shut down. And yet, when you wake up, you don't feel like someone new woke up. It still feels like you. So how can a continuous self survive complete non-existence for hours at a time? Here's a mainstream fact. During deep sleep, the thalamus, the brain's sensory relay station, basically goes offline, cutting off most external signals. Without that input, the cortex stops weaving the rich tapestry of awareness. You're still alive. Your body still regulates itself, but there's no inner movie. It's a blank screen. And here's the fringe tidbit. Some meditators and mystics claim they've stayed aware during deep sleep, resting in a state of pure consciousness without dreams or thoughts. They describe it as floating in an infinite void, a kind of awareness without content. Neuroscience hasn't confirmed these reports, but they raise a tantalizing question. Can awareness exist without anything to be aware of? Or is content, sounds, sights, thoughts, necessary for consciousness to feel real? Scientists still argue whether consciousness actually switches off in deep sleep, or if it's just inaccessible to memory. Maybe you are still aware at some level, but your waking brain can't retrieve it. Like trying to recall a forgotten conversation, it slips away when the spotlight of attention turns back on. Think about what that means. Every night, the you that's so desperate to survive, that clings to existence, simply disappears, and you don't mind. You even look forward to it. You set an alarm so you can dive into this nightly void. It's the most routine form of annihilation, and it feels normal. Here's a little joke to soften the existential dread. Sleep is like a free daily trial of death, but with better odds of waking up. But really, isn't it strange? If consciousness was truly continuous, you'd remember everything. But you don't. It's like a TV show that cuts to commercial breaks without your permission. One scene ends, the next begins. The missing minutes, gone. No one inside notices. There's also the puzzle of waking up. After total absence, the lights just turn back on. You return. The same memories, the same personality. But what if the you that wakes up isn't the same one who went to sleep? What if it's just a perfect copy, rebooting the same data every morning? You'd never know. And here's an eerie callback. Remember split brain patients? Deep sleep might be an even more extreme split, where the whole self dissolves. The communication threads that hold your inner world together just stop. No conflict, no dialogue, no story, just nothing. There's even a term for this philosophical puzzle, the problem of the gappy self. If the self can vanish without consequence, how real is it? If you can blink out for hours every night and return seamlessly, are you really a continuous entity, or just a recurring process? Think about anesthesia. It's the same phenomenon, but on demand. A doctor injects a drug, you count backward, and before you even hit 7, you're gone. Then, blink, you're back, with no sense of time passing. 10 minutes or 10 hours could have gone by. You'd never know. That gap, that nothingness, is terrifying if you look at it directly. But you don't. You trust it because it happens all the time. And then there's the fringe theory of micro-awakenings during sleep. Tiny moments of awareness that you never remember, like sparks flickering in the dark. Could it be that even in deep sleep, there are fleeting flashes of you, but they vanish too fast to leave a trace? Here's another thought that might keep you up tonight. If someone woke you every 10 minutes during deep sleep and asked, "Where were you just now?" You'd have no answer, no sense of "I was here." It's like being erased repeatedly, yet each time you return, you assume continuity. So what if death is just an extended deep sleep? The lights go out, and unlike every other night, they don't come back on. Would it feel any different? Or would it feel like nothing at all, because there would be no one there to feel? But let's not spiral too far down that abyss yet, because there's another possibility. Maybe your consciousness isn't just a fragile local phenomenon. Maybe it isn't entirely yours at all. Maybe what you call you is just a wave in something much larger, something shared. You're still here, still holding on to the fragile thread of your own awareness. But what if it isn't really yours? What if this you isn't a sealed-off island at all, but just one ripple on a vast ocean of consciousness? Some philosophers and mystics have whispered this for centuries, that the self is an illusion, that awareness is universal, flowing through everything like an invisible current. Your brain, in this view, isn't creating consciousness. It's more like a radio, tuning into a signal that's always been there. When the radio is damaged, the signal doesn't vanish. It just stops coming through clearly. Here's a mainstream fact. Every brain on Earth is built from the same stardust, the same elements forged in collapsing stars. Chemically, you are not unique. The calcium in your neurons, the iron in your blood, they're not special. They've been recycled across countless forms before you. So is it really so impossible to imagine that consciousness too might be something shared rather than owned? And here's a fringe tidbit. In certain psychedelic states, people report the eerie feeling that their individual self dissolves into something bigger. They describe becoming one with everything, as if the boundaries between me and not me were just temporary illusions. Neuroscientists call it ego dissolution, and they've scanned brains during these states. What they see is fascinating. The default mode network, the part that generates your sense of self, goes quiet. Without that storytelling hub, the brain stops separating inside from outside. Everything feels connected. Scientists still argue whether these experiences reveal a deeper truth about consciousness, or if they're just brain glitches, like a computer looping into strange patterns when the code misfires. But people who've had them insist they felt more real than waking life, as if they glimpsed the foundation under the floorboards of existence. Imagine it. If your consciousness is like a drop of water, maybe it only seems separate while it's in the cloud of your body. When the body dies, the drop falls back into the ocean, indistinguishable from the rest. That doesn't mean you survive exactly as you are now, but it might mean that awareness, in some form, never truly ends. Here's a soft joke. If minds are waves in one giant ocean, then arguing about whose wave is better is like two ripples arguing about who owns the sea. But even without mystical language, think about the way your brain mirrors others. When you see someone smile, mirror neurons in your brain fire as if you were smiling. When someone yawns, you yawn. When someone's voice cracks in sadness, you feel a twinge in your chest. Your consciousness is porous. It leaks into others. It responds to them as if they're extensions of you. And here's something more immediate. Language itself is shared consciousness. These words right now are patterns of thought moving from my mind to yours. You're not generating these ideas from nowhere, you're borrowing them. Your mind is literally running a simulation of my mind as you hear this. Isn't that a kind of merging? Remember how we talked about your brain editing reality? What if it also edits out the sense of being connected to everything else? Maybe the feeling of being an isolated self is just a survival trick. After all, you can't go around feeling like the entire universe. You'd never get anything done. So your brain builds walls. This is me. That's not me. But the walls might be paper thin. There's even a strange theory in physics, more poetic than proven, that consciousness might be a fundamental field, like gravity or electromagnetism. Your brain wouldn't be producing it. It would be interacting with it, shaping it into a personal experience. If that's true, then what you call you is just a temporary shape in something infinite. And here's an eerie callback. When we talked about deep sleep, remember how you disappeared completely and then returned? What if what really returned wasn't the same drop of self, but just the same ocean reshaping itself into the same pattern? You wake up every morning thinking you're the same person. But what if it's just the universal mind rebooting the same template? This idea isn't new. Eastern philosophies like Advaita Vedanta and Mahayana Buddhism have said it for centuries. The self is an illusion, and there is only one consciousness playing all these roles. You think you're separate, but you're the same awareness looking through different eyes. And here's a thought experiment. If you swap memories and personality traits, would the self still be you? Or would it be someone else entirely? If your entire identity can change while awareness remains, maybe the self is just the costume consciousness wears, not what it really is. Even neuroscientists are starting to admit they don't know why the self feels so bounded. Split brain patients, deep sleep, anesthesia, they all show how fragile the sense of me is. So if the boundaries are this easy to blur, maybe they were never absolute. So imagine this. Right now, you're listening to me. You feel like a single person in a single moment, but maybe, on some level, the same awareness listening to these words is the same one that will listen tomorrow in someone else, or in another lifetime, or in another place entirely. Whether you believe it or not, the idea changes how you see others. If every mind is just a facet of the same thing, hurting someone else would literally be hurting yourself in another disguise. That's the quiet, unnerving beauty of it. But before you drift into cosmic unity, let's return to something closer. If the self might not even be truly yours, maybe it was never as solid as you believed. In fact, what you call you is mostly just a story your brain keeps rewriting. You're still here, drifting in that soft haze between questions and answers. But let's zoom back in from the cosmic ocean. Let's talk about the thing you call you, the person you believe you are. Because here's the quiet twist. Your sense of self is not a fixed thing. It's a story. And your brain is the unreliable narrator. Every day, you're editing your own autobiography. You remember moments, your first heartbreak, your proudest achievement, that embarrassing thing you said years ago, and they feel like snapshots of truth, but they're not. Memory isn't a recording, it's a reconstruction. Each time you recall an event, your brain rewrites it slightly, like opening and resaving a file. Details blur, timelines shift, emotions bleed from one memory into another. And the next time you remember, you're remembering the edited version, not the original. Here's a mainstream fact. Neuroscientists call this memory reconsolidation. Studies show that every recall destabilizes a memory, making it vulnerable to change before it's stored again. So your past isn't fixed. It's more like wet clay, reshaped a little every time you touch it. And here's the fringe tidbit. Some researchers believe your brain actively fabricates entire memories to keep the story of you coherent. There's a famous experiment called the Lost in the Mall study. Participants were told a fake childhood story, that they once got lost in a shopping mall. A third of them not only remembered it, but added extra details. Their brains filled in the blanks to protect the illusion of a consistent self. Scientists still argue whether the self is truly continuous or just a patchwork of moments tied together with narrative glue. But think about it. Your body changes cell by cell over the years. Your personality shifts. Your beliefs evolve. So what exactly remains? The only thing that feels stable is the story you tell yourself about who you've been and who you are. Here's a soft, sardonic joke. Your brain is less like a historian and more like a PR manager. It edits out the messy parts, spins the embarrassing ones, and presents a version of you that feels marketable to yourself. And the editing doesn't stop at memory. It's happening right now, in real time. Your brain takes the constant flood of thoughts, sensations, and impulses and strings them into a neat little I, who's supposedly in charge. But that I is just the spokesperson, not the whole team. Most of what you think and feel comes from unconscious processes you'll never meet. Remember the left hemisphere interpreter from split brain patients. It's doing the same thing for your whole life. When something happens that doesn't fit your self-image, your mind just bends the story until it does. That's why you can look back at bad decisions and still find a way to justify them. You can't tolerate a plot hole in your own narrative. Think about déjà vu, that eerie feeling that you've been here before. It's your memory system glitching, tagging a present moment as a past one. It feels profound, like a message from fate, but it's really just your brain fumbling the continuity of the story. And what about the moments you forget entirely? Do they vanish? Or do they still live somewhere in the brain, quietly shaping you from the shadows? Trauma researchers say even memories you can't consciously recall still affect your behavior. So there are parts of you you'll never access, ghosts in the narrative that still steer the plot. Here's an eerie callback. Remember how we talked about the brain lagging behind the present, always stitching together a slightly late reality? It's doing the same with you. Your sense of self is delayed, a summary of what just happened rather than what's truly happening. You're living in the highlight reel of your own life. Now imagine what happens when the story unravels. People with certain types of brain damage lose their sense of continuity. They live in 5-minute loops, unable to form new memories. And yet, in those 5 minutes, they still feel like themselves. That means the story isn't essential for the momentary feeling of being you. It's only essential for the illusion of a long, stable life. So here's the haunting question. If your past can be rewritten and your future is unknown, what exactly is the self in this precise moment? Is it anything more than a temporary narrator, making sense of the chaos just long enough to feel real? And yet, you cling to this story. We all do. Because without it, the self feels like it would dissolve into nothing. So your brain obliges, writing and rewriting, smoothing the seams, convincing you that you've been one continuous person all along. Here's another joke, a soft one. If the self is just a story, you're basically living in your brain's longest-running soap opera, full of plot twists, continuity errors, and dramatic retcons. But what if you strip away even the story? What's left? Just raw perception. And here's the final twist waiting for you. Even that isn't real in the way you think it is. You've never seen the raw world. You've only ever lived inside a simulation your brain generates. And now, we've reached the final turn in this soft, spiraling path. After all the mysteries of where consciousness comes from, how it edits reality, how it splits, disappears and rewrites itself. Here's the quietest, yet strangest truth of all. You've never seen the real world, not even once. What you call reality is a simulation your brain builds on the fly. Light bounces off objects, enters your eyes, and is converted into electrical signals. But your brain doesn't see light. It only receives patterns of energy. From that, it constructs a three-dimensional world, filling it with color, shape, and meaning. But color isn't out there. The sky isn't actually blue. The molecules scatter light at different wavelengths, and your brain interprets one as blue. Without a brain to process it, there's no blue, just physics. Here's a mainstream fact. You don't see the world in real time or in raw data. You see what your brain predicts you'll see. Neuroscientists call it predictive coding. Your brain takes partial sensory information and guesses the rest, serving you a polished version of reality. You're basically hallucinating, just in a way everyone agrees on. And here's the fringe tidbit. Some theories claim your brain works like a virtual reality headset, rendering a simplified interface so you can survive without being overwhelmed. Think about it. You don't see the trillions of atoms in a coffee cup. You just see cup. You don't see the true chaos of the universe. You see a user-friendly version. Evolution didn't design you to see reality. It designed you to see what was useful. Scientists still argue whether we can ever access the thing in itself, the raw world beyond perception. Philosopher Donald Hoffman goes further and says we can't, and we're not even supposed to. He calls it the desktop interface theory. Just like the icons on your computer don't show you the actual code, your perception doesn't show you the actual universe. It shows you a symbolic shortcut, a simplified illusion that hides the overwhelming complexity. So when you reach for a chair, you're not touching real matter. You're interacting with your brain's best rendering of it. And when you hear a sound, you're not hearing actual vibrations. You're hearing how your brain chooses to translate them. Even your sense of a solid body is a phantom, a unified feeling stitched together from millions of separate nerve signals. Here's a soft joke. If the world is a simulation, your brain is the cheap graphics card trying to keep up with the frame rate. And remember all the other layers we uncovered. How your vision skips over the blind spot. How your memories rewrite themselves. How your decisions happen before you know it. Put it all together. The self that thinks it sees and acts in the world is sitting inside a curated hallucination, stitched with delays and edits, narrated after the fact. Now here's the strangest callback. When you dream, your brain creates entire worlds without any external input. People, places, entire stories, generated from nothing but your neural activity. And you believe those worlds are real until you wake up. So what makes this waking world any different? If the brain can generate a convincing reality in sleep, how can you be so sure this one isn't just another dreamlike rendering? Even your sense of space is flexible. In experiments with virtual reality, people can be tricked into feeling like they're outside their own bodies, floating in the corner of a room. In the rubber hand illusion, a fake rubber hand is stroked in sync with your real, hidden hand, and within minutes, your brain adopts the rubber one as part of you. The boundary of self can shift so easily. So what's truly real? The philosopher Immanuel Kant said you can never know the noumenon, the thing as it truly is. You can only know the phenomenon, the thing as it appears to you. And modern neuroscience agrees. Everything you experience is an appearance, an interpretation. The real world might be nothing like the one you see. And yet, even knowing this, you keep living inside the simulation. You still smile at sunsets, still recognize faces you love, still feel the warmth of a touch. Maybe the illusion is the only reality you're meant to have. Maybe the map is the territory, because it's the only one you can ever walk on. So here you are, at the end of the spiral. Consciousness shouldn't exist, but it does. It edits reality, it lags, it splits, it vanishes and returns. It might be shared, it might be fake, and it definitely lives inside a brain-made simulation. And yet, you feel it. You're aware of being aware. That's the one thing you can't doubt, even if everything else crumbles. And maybe that's the real point. Consciousness doesn't need a reason. It just is. A fragile, inexplicable miracle, staring at itself in the dark. Now let's soften everything. Close your eyes a little heavier now. Let the edges of your thoughts blur. Feel the rhythm of your own breath, slow and calm. You don't need to hold all these questions. Let them drift away like faint ripples on a quiet pond. You are just here in this moment, floating in the gentle hum of your own being. You don't need to solve consciousness tonight. You only need to rest inside it. The world, real or not, will still be here when you wake. Soften everything now. Let the questions dissolve like mist at dawn. The self, the stories, the layers of reality, all of it can fade for a while. Feel the quiet weight of your body sinking into comfort, the steady rhythm of breath anchoring you to something calm and simple. There is no need to hold the threads of thought anymore. You are safe to drift, safe to let go. The edges of you can blur, and nothing will be lost. Just rest, just breathe. Just let the soft hum of awareness cradle you into stillness. Sweet dreams.